The comeback kid made another comeback during the week in an effort to keep the president in a job. Bill Clinton and Barack Obama may dislike each other, and they do, but when duty calls, Bill answers. Eloquently, I must admit. It's 40 years since the attack by Black September on Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics, and 70 years since the decisive battle of the Second World War was fought out in the Russian city of Stalingrad. More on those shortly. And in elections in the French-speaking province of Quebec, the separatist Parti Québécois is forming a minority government. So can we expect another referendum there on independence from Canada? Keep watching, because this, I promise, is the real deal. Welcome to The Real Deal on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. I'm George Galloway, and I'm here every week in central London, bringing you the news and views you just won't easily get in the corporate media. Shooting from the hip and shooting from the lip as always, but if you wanted to fire back at me, you could at least email me at the address showing on the screen. President Obama clearly has a silver tongue. He was able to persuade Bill Clinton, still smarting over his wife's defeat by Obama in 2008, to give the nomination address to the Democratic Party's convention. And Bill's speech was entirely different to all of the mundane stuff which had gone before, but you expect that from him. The audience hung on every word, and many of those could have come from an economics textbook. Bill sure oozes charisma. Obama's enlisting of Clinton was clearly aimed at trying to persuade white working-class voters who are chary of him to come on board. So how did the president cajole former President Clinton into backing Obama? As someone said of Bill, he loves to be needed as much as he needs to be loved. That someone might have been me. It's clear from both the Democratic convention and the Republican one that preceded it that the election is going to be fought on the economy. It's the economy, stupid, was the slogan that Clinton's chief strategist, James Carville, hung around the successful 1992 presidential campaign by Clinton. It too will be making a comeback. Yet another Eurozone debt plan was unveiled by the President of the European Union on Thursday, which I predict will go the way of the countless others which preceded it. And Pakistan expelled the charity Save the Children's foreign staff during the week, claiming that they had given cover in the CIA operation to kill Osama bin Laden. And the Pentagon is threatening to sue the former Special Forces soldier who has written a book which rejects the official account of bin Laden's slaying. The book, No Easy Day, was written by a Navy SEAL under the pseudonym Mark Owen. He claims that bin Laden was shot as he looked out of his door as soldiers ran up the stairs, and not after he ducked back inside to grab a weapon, as the Pentagon had claimed. The truth, of course, could be easily established, but probably won't be. These soldiers were wearing head cams, which of course captured all the action. Certainly, President Obama and Hillary Clinton were able to watch it all live in the White House, a kind of snuff movie. The London Paralympics closing ceremony will be taking place about now. A rather different ceremony was held at an airbase in Germany on Thursday to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the attack by Palestinian Black September guerrillas at the Munich Olympics, in which 11 Israeli athletes and 1 German died. Over those 40 years, the Palestinians have tried war, and they've tried peace. Oh, how they've tried peace, but they still have no country. Indeed, it seems further away than ever. But I believe still that it will come, if not in my lifetime, then in that of my children's, God willing. Another bloody anniversary has had nothing like the coverage it deserves. 70 years ago, what proved to be the decisive, and certainly the bloodiest, battle of the Second World War opened in the Soviet city of Stalingrad. It's reckoned that up to 2 million people perished in this 6-month battle, which blunted the Nazi armies and then turned them back, never to recover. My studio guest is an old friend who's making his own sort of commemoration, namely a set of classy T-shirts to mark the anniversary. He's Hugh Tisdall of the Philosophy Football Company, purveyors of fine garments to gentlemen and ladies all over the world. Hugh, welcome to The Real Deal. Let's talk about this particular Stalingrad edition, which I must say is a work of art, a real classy piece of work. It's a cliche, but it's true, isn't it, that if Stalingrad had gone the other way, you and I would be having this conversation in German.
Absolutely right, yeah. It was a fundamental point, turning point in the Second World War. This 70th anniversary is something we're marking, but it's just about to go out of living memory.
Yes, you're marking it, but precious few others are. I haven't seen a single reference in the British media, I doubt if there are any at all in the American media, to a sacrifice of 2 million souls and a great victory, without which the Second World War couldn't have been won. There is an attempt, witting or unwitting, let's be charitable and say unwitting, to kind of write out or airbrush out the Red Army's role in the defeat of Hitler and the victory in the Second World War, isn't there?
There is. I think that's because John Wayne wasn't there. We've had a very Western-centric view of the Second World War, that it was won on the beaches of Normandy. In fact, it was won on the Russian steppes 2 years earlier.
At Kursk.
Oh, well, at Stalingrad and then at Kursk.
The Kursk tank battle was, I mean, absolutely decisive, and yet hardly anyone even knows the word.
No.
Stalingrad itself has, of course, been wiped off the map in the post-Soviet era, but the battle will never be. In fact, you've commemorated the sacrifice of the Red Army before, haven't you, on these occasions with your T-shirts? We
have. We did a set of shirts on the Second World War theatres of war, which included a shirt on the Eastern Front. They were all using aircraft markings of the time, very simple designs. People liked them a lot. We like to celebrate or commemorate these events from the past, not because we're obsessed with the past, but we think the current generation should be reminded of them. Because, as you say, they're not often told about these stories.
No, indeed. I mean, I've marvelled at your work for many years, and we've travelled together to Gaza, and so I know your work very well. But it is not common on the British left in progressive circles, first of all, to give the Second World War its place in history. I happen to believe that Mr. Churchill was right, that it was our finest hour. Our country was never as great and has never been as great since. And this line which you're pursuing, which I wholly endorse, but which very few people are ready to, is to pay tribute to the Soviet sacrifice in the war, without which it could not possibly have been won.
That's right. Up until Stalingrad, the Nazi forces knew virtually nothing but success. There were setbacks, the Battle of Britain, sometimes in North Africa, but until then, essentially, they were expansionist and victorious. At Stalingrad, that whole movement was stopped and turned around and forced back again. And Hitler's 1,000-year Reich lasted only 12 years. And I think people must be reminded about that constantly.
Now, T-shirts are a wonderful way of conveying messages. I mean, I was in Indonesia just a few days ago, and in a shopping mall, I counted 3, maybe 4 Che Guevara T-shirts on the breasts of guys who I was unable to ask them if they politically understood what it was that they were wearing. I'm inferring that they did. Very unusual in the Far East to find a Latin American revolutionary commemorated in that way. But they send a very powerful message, T-shirts, and they're, by definition, mobile. You see them everywhere.
That's right. What I like about them is they're democratic. You only have to have 10 or 15 pounds to own that message. If it was a limited edition print on the wall, that would be hundreds of pounds, and that would be limited to a certain sector of the market. But T-shirts are democratic, and they're public. You carry a message with you on the street. I often find if I am wearing a shirt, people are looking at what the shirt says. You know, it's a form of communication, a form of broadcasting.
It is, and how is it doing? How is the business doing?
Well, we're small, but we like it that way. That gives us our independence. We can pick and choose what we do. We're not only marking things in the past, we sell shirts in order to allow us to campaign in the present and into the future. So the package we have is that we try and interest people in messages. Some people say we don't sell T-shirts, we sell ideas, and that's quite a nice way of looking at it. So although we're small, we think we're quite sharp and we use our efforts quite selectively.
What are the best-selling shirts that you've made, and tell us about the political thinking that lay behind them?
Well, the To this day, the best-selling shirt is the first shirt we ever did by the French existentialist goalkeeper, Albert Camus. The first quote we had, he said, "All that I know most surely about morality and the obligations of men, I owe to football." Well, that's not the sort of thing footballers normally say.
No, Cantona's the only other man I could think of who might have said it.
True, but he was he gave up playing at 17 because of tuberculosis. But Camus loved football and used it as a metaphor, as many philosophers have, because football is understood around the world. It's a simple game with simple rules, and it's inexpensive. So that was our first shirt to get us going. But after 5 years, we found that only doing shirts around football, even if they were from interesting philosophers, wasn't enough. We wanted to start doing political shirts. We wanted to broaden out what we could do, because we thought there was a larger audience there beyond football. We're still interested in football, but you can see from the Olympics that there is this wider, much wider area that we could be working in. So that's what we're trying to do.
Tell us some of the political T-shirts that you've done.
We've done shirts about the Arab Spring. We do shirts for various trade unions on campaigns in this country. We're selective with who we work with. We are affiliated to nobody really, but we work with many like-minded organisations on the progressive left. We feel we can come in and give them something specific. We are non-corporate, so our voice tends to be fairly individualistic, and our products are liked by unions. And we've been doing that for 15 years, and we don't intend to stop.
So people can come along with their political idea, you turn it into a message.
That's right.
That can go everywhere.
That's right.
And that's a particularly powerful niche. I wish you all the best with it. How would people get in touch with you? Do you have a website?
We do. Our website is called philosophyfootball.com. Do get in touch. Anyone can contact us through that site and we'll get back to them.
Well, I may have a job for you myself. I'm looking at a line of T-shirts to try to reintroduce to popular memory the late and great President Sukarno. You know that the non-aligned movement met in Tehran just the other day. The non-aligned movement was, of course, founded in Bandung in Indonesia, and Sukarno was one of the all-time greats, in my opinion, and that hardly anyone in this country has ever heard of him. But I hope that with Philosophy Football's help, we might be able to begin to turn that around. Thanks very much indeed. That's philosophyfootball.com. Stalingrad is the latest one on the blocks. I wish you every success with it. It's a beautiful piece of work, and anything which revives the memory. Or the old Soviet epitaph, wasn't it? No one is forgotten. Nothing is forgotten. You did a T-shirt.
We did. It's used on Soviet war memorials. It's a quote from Olga Bergholz, who was at the siege of Stalingrad for 900 days. She was a poet. And this line, "No one is forgotten, nothing is forgotten," does sum up their sacrifice, their commitment, and their losses.
Well, it's a fascinating subject. And you know my size, Hugh, so I'm hoping mine is in the post. There's more coming up right after this. Now, I mentioned in the introduction about the electoral success of the Parti Québécois in Canada. This was somewhat overshadowed by a shooting at the election rally, which left one person dead and another wounded. Seemed to be an assassination attempt on the new premier. On the line now from Quebec is Ehab Lotayev, who, as well as being an engineer and political activist, is a poet. I think this is a first on The Real Deal, a poet. Ehab, in Quebec, in Montreal, great city, welcome to The Real Deal. Now, Ehab, there have been two referendums or referenda in the past about Quebec seceding from Canada. On both occasions, the voters said no to it. Are Parti Québécois going to try for a third time lucky?
They'd be foolish to try that now. They got just about 33% of the popular vote, and even the votes they get in an electoral campaign doesn't mean everybody who voted for them is going to vote for separation. So it's very unlikely, and I think people now those who were panicking on the past few weeks are more calm now.
What kind of party are they, Ihab? Are they a left-wing party, centrist, right-wing? I mean, nationalism can be good or bad. Like electricity, it can fry you in the electric chair or keep your baby alive in an incubator. Is the nationalism of the Parti Québécois of the electric chair variety or the children's incubator variety, in your view?
Well, you're talking to somebody who really has no affinity or love to nationalism. I have grown up in Egypt, where I saw positive things about nationalism in the 60s. But in general, when nationalism is of the flavor that thinks that just by separating we're going to have a better society, and then even during the call for nationalism or for separation shows ugly signs of discrimination towards minorities, etc., then there is not much positive there. The Parti Québécois traditionally were left-leaning. They still are compared to the other parties in the mainstream, but they certainly don't show that in any strong fashion anymore. They focus on separation, and they focus on the emotions of the majority to play their game.
What is the demographic makeup of Quebec nowadays? I mean, if they got 33% of the vote and that won it, we'll come on to what the other parties did in a minute. But, I mean, as a percentage, forgive my ignorance, of Quebec residents, what percentage of them would be Francophone people?
Francophone, and I'm no sociology expert, would be close to 80% or so.
80% would be Francophone, and yet only 33% voting for separation. That's, in a way, not that different from the Scottish separatist score at the moment. It's not that far off what is likely to happen if this is ever tested in Catalonia, or for that matter in the Basque Country. Do you think that a third is just about the glass ceiling for separatists in the Western world, at least?
Let's just not forget that in the 1995 referendum, the vote for separation was 49% versus 51%, or even closer than that. So it goes up and down, but basically at this point, nobody sees anything better than a third voting for separation. And also, I have to add that in 1995, in many opinions, the question wasn't that clear. It was more of a mandate to negotiate separation than a clear-cut, we're going to be a separate country tomorrow. So it doesn't. I mean, it worries some people, of course, because it's a trend that stems from certain feelings and ideologies. But it's not a real worry, in my opinion, at this point.
Now, if 80% are Francophone, that leaves 20%. Are they, as it were, English-speaking Canadians from the old stock, or are they new immigrants? Are there a significant number of new immigrants in Quebec?
Of course, yes, there are significant numbers of new immigrants in Quebec, and this I don't have a statistic for exactly, but I would assume that half or close to so of this left 20% that remains are new immigrants.
And it's unlikely that...
Or allophones as we call them here. So the province usually uses the terms francophones, anglophones, and allophones, which are all the others. Okay.
And it's a fair bet, is it, that not many of that 20% would have voted for the Parti Québécois?
It is. It would be quite true, especially in this campaign in particular. Which coming up to the campaign, there was a proposal of a charter of secularism by the Parti Québécois. Unfortunately, it was not really a charter of secularism, but in many ways a charter to discriminate against minorities and enforce the presence of the cultural majority with things like We don't want any religious symbols in public places or in the government, but we can accept some crucifixes and we can accept some of those signs. And one of the mayors of a small town here came out and spoke animal farm language, where he said, we respect all religions, we respect Islam, but we respect Christianity more. So the picture was even more on the emotional side to push away the Anglophones who are already afraid, and then most of the minorities felt that they are targeted. So I doubt very much that any of them voted for the Parti Québécois.
Who would they have voted for then? How did the other parties, including the governing Conservatives, who have turned Canada into one of the most right-wing countries in the world, Israel's principal friend in the world, the most outspoken critic of Muslims and of the Palestinians, for example. I mean, Mr. Harper has turned Canada into little more than an embassy of Israel, if you ask me. How did his party do?
Well, Quebec is a funny place. The National Federal Conservatives don't have a branch in Quebec, so there is no conservative party in the province of Quebec. The party that was ruling was, strangely enough, a liberal party, but it was quite a right, at best center-right leaning party. And actually, again, strangely enough, its head, the outgoing premier of Quebec, used to be a minister in the federal conservative government of Brian Mulroney in the late 80s, early 90s. So that party was expected to fare very badly in the Quebec elections. The polls showed it in third place, but when it came to election day, it got second place with only 4 seats difference between it and the Parti Québécois. So the Parti Québécois got 54 seats and the Liberals got 50 seats. Now, the Liberals had done great damage when they stood very fiercely and strongly against the student movement that was opposing tuition hikes, and dealt with them very strong-handedly, and also passed a bill known as Bill 78, which was a bit fascist and a bit draconian, where it said that any gathering of more than 50 people without a permit can be arrested, etc. So it really came down hard on the right to protest and the right to speak out. And the Premier, Jean Charest, the one who lost his own seat, came into this campaign saying that this is the public referendum on whether you are with or against the student protests and with or against the tuition hikes. So they didn't do as badly as people expected them to do, and I think that goes because the third place party, the one that is a new party, its first election run, which is more right and more conservative, the Coalition Avenir Québec, CAQ, was up in the polls, but when it came to election day, I guess many people didn't choose it as the opposite alternative to the Parti Québécois, but rather went back to the Liberals in that case, because, you know, in many cases, the new party, the unknown, untested, is never trusted that much. They got about 17, 18 seats with compared to 54 for the Parti Québécois.
Well, it's been a fascinating tour de horizon, as they might say in Quebec. Ehab Lotayev, thanks very much for joining us on The Real Deal. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. God willing, though, there'll be more at the same time and in the same place next week. I've been George Galloway. This has been The Real Deal on Press TV, the voice of the voiceless, and you have been a marvellous audience.